A little context. Several years ago, there was an odd salon with the theme beasts, and I have a favorite animal, the Portuguese man-of-war. It's a good animal. And I was going to do a talk on this animal, and then I started researching for the talk, and the talk was basically cool animal facts with the Portuguese man-of-war. And I like my talks to have a narrative through line, a reason. So I decided not to do it. But it's been kicking around in my head for a while. I'm doing a talk on a Portuguese writer. It's the Portuguese man-of-war. It's oddments. And so I give you cool animal facts with the Portuguese man-of-war. All right, so the number one coolest fact. Portuguese man-of-war floats on the surface of the ocean, looks like a ship. Thank you. Looks like a jellyfish. It is not. It is, in fact, a colonial organism. It is several different evolutionary things that combine together to create a single individual. Those things are the floaty bit on top. That is from the phylum Polyp, such as a sea anemone. And then the other three bits are from the Medusa phylum, aka jellyfish. And that is the eaty bit, the dangly poison bit, and the reproductive bit. The reproductive bit has a male and a female reproductive bit. They drop them off. They meet at some point in a depth in the ocean. No one's ever seen it. They come together, form a new, beautiful colony that floats to the surface to poison fish and live its life. I don't know. That's it. That's the best fact for the Portuguese man-of-war. So I would like, raise your glass for the tiniest sip. We have another toast coming. But to the Portuguese man-of-war, or more poetically, that strange compound sea creature, four inseparable organisms that dream they are one. As a bonus fact, that quote is from a Neil Gaiman short story that he wrote in the service of promoting the 1999 film The Matrix. All right, here we go. The main event, Writing Inside the Box with Fernando Pessoa, one of my very favorite writers. Pessoa was born in Lisbon, Portugal, in 1988, and will live through very tumultuous times. Just a few years before his birth, the Conference of Berlin saw Europe, with America moderating, carving up Africa for colonial interests. Portugal wants to get down on this. They don't think they have enough people spread out in their, mercantile empire. This is going to affect many people who all deserve odd salon talks. But we're covering Fernando Pessoa tonight. 5 years after his birth, his father dies of tuberculosis. His mother remarries the man who will become the Portuguese consul in Durban, South Africa. He will move his new family there, and Pessoa will live there from 1896 to 1905. Along with those tumultuous times I was talking about, he was in colonial Durban when Gandhi landed to start his first political protest action. But he was just a student. He came to South Africa speaking Portuguese. He would leave fluent in English and French as well. He returns to Portugal to go to university, of which he spends very little time at, those tumultuous times I was talking about. A couple of years after he gets back to Portugal, the king and his first heir are assassinated. 2 years later, a revolution will take out the monarchy entirely. For the following 15 years, his adult life, Portugal will enter a Great World War, or will enter the First Great World War, and 45 governments will come and go. When he has returned to Portugal, it's already been bankrupt twice in his lifetime. So, due to personal illness and the fact that the university is rarely in session because of student strikes, he decides to continue his education in the libraries and the cafes of Portugal, a country and a city that he will rarely ever leave again. He finds work as a clerk and as a translator, and it is really in that translation work and in the literary magazines where he has translated that he finds kind of his writing life. In 1915, he will start Orpheus with a few different writers and artist friends. That will only last for 2 issues, but that's basically what he does for the rest of his life as he contributes to, edits for, and starts literary magazines. As a writer, he will write prose, poetry, and criticism. He will talk about working on his masterwork, The Book of Disquiet. And as an editor, he's attracted to outsiders, sort of like himself, expatriates, people who've traveled extensively, people who cannot support themselves alone on their writing. People like Eduardo Lunca, a Brazilian poet living in Portugal, or Antonio Moura, basically a pundit now. He was obsessed with ancient Greece. He advocated strongly for a return to polygamy. He occasionally wore a toga. And before you think he is the best person I'm going to talk about tonight, he also supported Germany in the Great War. But that's actually part and parcel for Pessoa. He would publish people with every spectrum of political belief and ideology, so long as they wanted to write. And of course, he would talk about working on the Book of Disquiet. Of the people that Pessoa edited and worked with, 3 stand out as luminaries. Some of the greatest modern Portuguese poets that exist, and only one of them would cause Annetta to leave a bar. Probably the best one, though. This is Álvaro de Campos. De Campos studied engineering in Scotland. He was a naval engineer for the UK. He'd lived in London. He traveled extensively in East Asia. He was a poet in the modern style. He was a hedonist, an out bisexual, and he loved stirring the shit. Even though he and Pessoa were very good friends, he wrote several incredibly critical essays about his friend's work for publication. Maybe not having that problem, at least of being his friend, he also wrote incredibly critically of Ricardo Reis. Reis wrote classical odes in the style of Horace. He had actually studied medicine, but ultimately became a Latin teacher and immigrated to Brazil in 1919, though he was still represented in Portugal through the advocacy of his brother Frederico, as well as Pessoa himself. And finally, the man that kind of brings these 3 poets together, Alberto Cairo. Cairo was a shepherd who lived outside of Lisbon with his aunt. He had very, very little classical training, wrote in an incredibly direct style, and he died in 1915 of tuberculosis. Over the course of their lives, Reis, De Campos, and Pessoa would all claim this man as their master and would push for the publication and distribution of his work posthumously. I could continue telling you about all of the incredible collaborators that Pessoa worked with, like Friar Maurice or Maria Jose, but I've sort of told you about all of them, and the fact that I've started to tell you about Fernando Pessoa, because they are all Fernando Pessoa. Every named person in this talk is Fernando Pessoa. Not named, only the species. But yeah, and also not a jellyfish. But yeah, so over the course of his life, Pessoa would create over 70 of these alter egos. He would say, "I wake up from a dream and I immediately attribute it to someone else." He didn't enjoy the term pseudonym because it wasn't extreme enough. These people had complete biographies. They were interrelated. They lived, they laughed, they loved. Many of them died. And so he preferred the term heteronym. And that's what he did for years. He wrote and he wrote and he wrote and he published as himself and his others, and he talked about his masterwork, the Book of Disquiet. On November 29th, 1935, he wrote, "I know not what tomorrow will bring." The next day he died of cirrhosis of the liver due to alcoholism. Yeah. At the time of his death, he had published 1 book, Messages, a few self-published poetry folios, and many journal and magazine publications, again under his own name and those of his heteronyms. And you're asking, but James, there was something about a box. Where is this box? And this masterwork, the Book of Disquiet that you keep holding up? Well, I ask you to be patient for 1 slide. At the time of his death, in his rented room, was discovered a trunk, the titular box. Inside that box is almost 30,000 unedited papers. These papers are written in English, Portuguese, and French. They are written on notebook paper, they are typed, they are on the back of receipts, they are in the margins of other publications, and they are given credit to his many different headonyms, and many, many, many of them note that they belong to the Book of Disquiet. It will take lifetimes of work to go through this trunk. The first publication of the Book of Disquiet does not come out until 47 years after his death in 1982. This is the 40th anniversary. What is this book? Well, it's a journal of one of his late headonyms, Bernardo Saras. It's the foundation of a very inconsistent ideology, its random thoughts and half-finished ideas. It comes together to create a beautiful and vulnerable portrait of a not altogether sympathetic man. Well, at least that's what this edition does. Because more than anything, it's unfinished. Every different edition that comes out is an interpretation and a collaboration with a dead man and an editor. These 3 English editions feature the work of 2 different translators and 3 completely different interpretations. One of his editors went so far as to say, I'll go ahead and number this thing, but I suggest we print everything loose leaf, put it in a box, and tell readers to dump it on the floor and read it whatever order they decide to pick things up in. And so, as you go through the history and the work of Fernando Pessoa, it becomes really obvious that you can't give him a single authorial voice. Through all of the tumultuous times he lived through, he wrote at every political and social position. And it becomes really clear that Fernando Pessoa was just another hedonym of Fernando Pessoa. And that brings us back inevitably and perfectly to the Portuguese man of war, who, thanks to Fernando Pessoa, finally has that narrative through line that I was looking for years ago. Because the point of the Portuguese man of war and Pessoa, at least to me, is ostensibly the same. We all have various motivations. We do things, we think things that don't line up, and you try so hard to push that into this consistent idea of self. And maybe that capital I doesn't need to be such a monolith. Here's a quote from the Book of Disquiet. Each of us is several, is many, is a profusion of selves. In a vast colony of our being, there are many species of people who think and feel in different ways. Put a little more succinctly, I don't know how many souls I have. So, let us raise a glass to the Portuguese man of war, to Fernando Pessoa, his many headonyms, and the souls in all of us.